It's clear that we need to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions both as individuals and on a larger scale for countries. So climate mitigation is any action taken to reduce climate change. They're mostly large-scale solutions, but on the small scale is carbon footprint. And so you're going to calculate your carbon footprint and list the actions that you can take, that any individual can take to reduce your carbon footprint. One of the easiest ones that you'll find is energy, using electricity. It goes back to typically burning fossil fuels, and that's a link that is not necessarily clear because you're not burning any fossil fuels in your home, but fossil fuels are burned in order to generate the electricity you use in your home. Saving electricity on the consumer end in your own home actually multiplies its effects 3 to 5 times on the carbon dioxide emissions on the production end. That's at the factory, at the coal-fired power plant. So saving electricity means turning things off, and not just the lights. Turn off your phone. Try going a day without it. I do turn off my iPad whenever I can. In accordance with the Paris Agreement, all countries in the world need to cut 9 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions. 9 billion tons. Now, to give you scale of the magnitude of this goal, this is directly from the ebook, Chemistry in Context, to just do 1 billion tons. Each of these would cut 1 billion tons. So cutting energy usage in the world's buildings, all the world's buildings, 20 to 25%. Or having all cars have better mileage, gas mileage, 60 miles per gallon instead of 30 miles per gallon. Now that has to be all cars everywhere. So that old car that your grandma's still driving that only gets 10 miles per gallon, we need no more of that. Capturing and sequestering carbon dioxide at 800 coal-burning power plants. Dioxide that would be emitted in the atmosphere and storing it. And that's an attempt to reverse the process of burning fossil fuels that we looked at in the carbon cycle that has no reverse. And this is an attempt to do that. And also replacing coal-fired power plants, 700. So this would be all over the world. These are coal-fired power plants that are used usually to generate electricity in countries all over the world, and replacing them with nuclear reactors to generate electricity, wind power or solar power to generate electricity. So we'll be getting into all of this in Chapter 6, the types of alternative energy. So this again, any of these one steps would be 1 billion tons, and we need this times 9. So this is something that is going to require governments, industry, citizens, everyone on board. So this is carbon sequestration, also called carbon capture and storage, or CCS. So this is the idea of capturing carbon dioxide before it goes into the atmosphere. And so this would capture at a factory or at a coal-fired power plant that carbon dioxide and then pump it underground, where it could be stored underground. So this can go into the deep ocean or into a pond with bacteria, and the bacteria in theory could process the carbon dioxide. But this would be in opposition of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. Now, a natural process that would be equivalent to carbon capture and storage is reforestation, planting a lot of trees. This is what trees do, is they take carbon dioxide and they turn that carbon dioxide into oxygen. So if we have an excess of trees, and this is part of Green New Deal, is planting 1 million trees. And it can be done all around the world. Countries certainly can use more trees. This is another climate mitigation, so large-scale solution, is called cap and trade. Cap and trade is trading carbon dioxide emissions between factories or between coal-fired power plants. And this idea is both, there's two ideas here. We could take the mandatory approach for cap and trade or the flexible approach for cap and trade. In either, there's a cap. So a cap is a yearly limit on carbon dioxide emissions. And so this puts yearly limits on 2 plants, A and B, or a yearly limit on 2 plants, A and B. And the limit would be lower than their current output of carbon dioxide. So putting a cap lower than what their output is, lower than the output, and putting a cap lower than the output of every single plant. So it starts with a cap, a yearly limit on carbon dioxide emissions. Then these plants need to reach that cap. And so plants that are not able to do that can buy or trade permits between from a plant that is able to do that. So this is an example of permits can be traded or bought. If this plant was able to reduce and this plant was not able to reduce, then this overall ends up in a reduction of emissions. Same thing here with the mandatory reduction. This is just a cap in general. All its complexities, the cap and trade system has been successful in reducing sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide in the U.S. So this is a possibility. California, in fact, was the first state to adopt cap and trade for carbon emissions here in 2011. A strategy, large-scale strategy called carbon taxes, which is basically just say, let's just tax companies that are putting out carbon dioxide emissions, and then that will be reflected in the products they make and sell in those prices. So there are options out there. Banning chlorofluorocarbons required legislation, so will carbon emissions. This is the cover of Time magazine in July 2020, and the article was called "One Last Chance: The Defining Year for the Planet." And this is both it's an infographic. It's both a graphs in here, but also a picture of what we see going on. So there's good and bad. We see that this is global climate change, temperatures increasing over the centuries, and renewable energy has increased. Loss of polar ice, loss of glaciers and ice at the North and South Pole has led to sea level rise. It does take lobbying politicians like Greta Thunberg, Times Person of the Year for 2019, for basically just sitting outside of her state government with a climate strike. So those were the climate strikes every Friday, and I've been to some. This was in downtown LA. This was a picture I took on one of my Fridays that I went downtown. Now, everyone doesn't have to become a climate activist. But everyone has to do something in some way. I really have a lot of hope that we can band together on this.